Hello everyone, I'm an Agile coach with C Prime and I have Derek Huether here, Principal Solutions Engineer for Enterprise Agility. That's a mouthful. But I really wanted to start off with my story, and I've been able to support multiple transformations in different kinds of organizations, the financial industry, oil and gas, and technology. And one of the things that I like to see and resonates really well is a learn a little, do a little kind of model, where we figure out what works, what doesn't work, and how do we make adjustments along the way. And the most important thing that I've seen is when we leverage a scaling tool like Jira Align. It really focuses on us embracing enterprise agility and how do we focus on people, process, and tools working together. Derek, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hello everyone. My focus is at Atlassian is enterprise agility, and so I solution the art of the possible for potential and existing customers and our partners. I was a management consultant for many, many years prior to Atlassian, and I actually was a Jira Align and Enterprise Insights customer. So I'm always looking at the world through design or system thinking, continuous improvement. So it goes without saying, I'm the one you want to avoid when going to a party.
All right, so let's jump in. We're going to talk about empowering your Agile transformation with Jira Align. These are some of the topics that we're going to cover, and we're not diving deep into change management models. We're not going to talk about Cotter's theory or ADKAR. Instead, we're really going to focus on our partnership and how we work together to empower your Agile transformation. We don't have a lot of time, but we want to make sure that we cover everything that's valuable to you. Derek?
So we're going to start by asking you to think about, what do you value? Every organization, you have one or more value drivers that are going to push you, towards that, and you're going to need enterprise agility. We don't know if you're trying to get more products to market, shorter time to market, you're trying to get more predictability. Maybe you're trying to surprise, delight customers. So the other thing you might be trying to do is future-proof your companies or your organizations for unforeseen events, which we may have had over the last couple of years. Enterprise-level agility, it should provide you organizational-wide system. It's going to allow you to accomplish current, future goals. It's going to enable you to evolve and innovate in the coming years. And because most organizations aren't where they really need to be, getting you there is what we're going to call Agile transformation. But, to do this, you're going to need the ability to what we say pivot. It's not like we're going to need a global health crisis or pandemic, to force us all to change. So don't worry, once we get through that, it's all going to be fine, right? But, well, maybe a supply chain disruption, or maybe wars, layoffs. We just don't know what's next. And so to help you gauge if you have the ability to survive or thrive through the next crisis, we're going to need to create a unit of measure. It's just going to allow us to have Agile where we are. And if you're familiar with ITIL, ITSM, DevOps, you've probably heard this popular metric called mean time to recovery. But for enterprise agility, we're going to be using a metric called mean time to pivot. And I'm not talking about delivery team level process perspective here. I'm talking about the entire organization. So we're going to ask you, how quickly can you react to a global event or industrial event and not just recover, but to thrive?
So C Prime uses this term a lot, and we really like mean time to pivot. And I think it resonates well with enterprise agility, because really, what the hell does enterprise agility mean to you, to your organization? And what are we really trying to accomplish? The goal is always the outcomes for your organization. From an organization perspective, it's really about how quickly can you actually react to an industry event, to a pandemic, to something happening in the market, and then what do you realize from that impact on how you're going to change? Is it an internal change? Is it an external change? But really, we're looking at the pivot on our strategy. And then how is that understood throughout your organization? Not just at your team level, program level, but across the entire organization. And then how do you execute upon that in an efficient way? It really is about how you take your C-level strategy from your executives all the way down to the individual contributors. Connecting strategy to execution is another term that I like to use a lot. And it really helps when you have a tool like Jira Align that connects everything together. Because really, you need transparency in order to do those things, how you're going to do them, and then actually identify the gaps to get there. So really, from the transformations that I've been a part of, it's always individual pieces. People think about training teams, they think about implementing some kind of process, and they see them as separate. But the one I love is a tool is going to save it all. If I just bring this tool into my organization, it's going to save everything. But that doesn't really work. What we really need to think about is how people, process, and tools work together. And that's really in conjunction with the mindsets and the behaviors that are needed, incorporating the live data. And I think we're going to jump into that a little bit more as we go forward.
So we all know that the road to transformation, it's not linear. It zigs, it zags, it's up, it's down, it starts and it stops. And making transformation, it's a continuous journey. And it's similar how we may feel during an overall transformation. But along this journey, you're going to need some things like team maturity and consistent processes, foundational aspects to get visibility for unplanned work, stuff like that, in order to fully build this enterprise visibility.
Right, and I think you want to ask yourself some serious questions. Where are you right now? Where do you need to be? What tools are going to help me get there? And then who's going to help us get there? Because 9 times out of 10, you can't do it by yourself. You need some kind of partner or vendor in order to support it. So prior to this event, you thought you were doing just fine. So whatever it was, we're going to use the pandemic because That's the thing we've all just gone through. Mm-hmm. So what do you do in the face of that disruption, and how do you steer your organization in a better way so you can do less of some things, more of others, and figure out what that looks like?
So when we're talking about the tools, we may start with Jira software, maybe some key add-ons, but as we're going to scale and learn and build team of teams, you're going to need something like Jira Align. And as you scale more and maybe evolve, you're going to need something like Enterprise Insights. And so just to confirm, if you're new to this, it's all good. Jira Align, it's a separate platform than Jira. And it aggregates team-level Jira data and third-party tool data, and it makes all that work visible across the enterprise in real time. And it gets everyone on the same page to determine scope, your roadmaps, dependencies across teams and portfolios. And Enterprise Insights is our business intelligence tool that it's going to allow you to create visualizations outside of Jira and Jira Align, and that's going to allow leadership for the first time to consume where they want it and when they want it.
Right, so I think I'm gonna just put a little plug in here. This is where C Prime and Atlassian can help you a lot, because we work very closely together from a tooling and people's perspective. And C Prime can definitely help you with any type of coaching, any type of training. We're a platinum partner with Atlassian. We're a gold partner with Scaled Agile. So that's my little plug for the talk, and I think we'll dive right in. So really, what's the difference between team, program, and portfolio agility? It's not really about people, work, and time. I've said this previously. It's really about people, process, and tools, and how those are all directly related to your transformation. At each level, everyone is doing something slightly different. The processes are different, the roles are different, and Jira might be used for those teams. But you really have to focus on how does that scale together, and then at what level do we need leadership commitment. I will say that without leadership commitment, this fails. You need that without a doubt.
So I can't stress enough that word commitment.
Yep.
To transform, there's a big organizational commitment that everyone at every level is going to have to make. And the teams, they have to commit to being open to change, to be open to standardizing some ways of doing things. The team of teams, they have to commit to taking input from maybe new leaders, new managers, and do different things. And it's all going to drive towards this strategic change. And the entire organization has to commit to this huge change management undertaking. So it would be great if we could just flip a switch and tomorrow, all of our problems are going to be solved. But honestly, that's not our reality, because it does require very strong commitment at all levels. And it's not necessarily agile everything everywhere all at once. You remember to not lose sight of what you believe success looks like for your organization. There are some very successful, effectively scaled agile organizations that still have strong elements of waterfall work execution. And maybe they run a giant network, or maybe they are manufacturing medical devices or something like that. And I hesitate to give this large enterprise the impression that agile all the time, everywhere, because that's really not true. And it's such a large undertaking to make organizational level change.
So I think really it's like what Derek was saying, it's not a one size fits all. It's what is right for your organization. It's what goals do you want to accomplish. And you may not need strong level agility at every single level. You may have waterfall teams that need to integrate into the entire process, and that's okay. The critical component is being able to adapt to any event and put your people, processes, and tools in place so that you know what needs to get done. Again, the commitment comes at different levels, different flavors, different colors, but it's really depending on where you are and where you need to be so that you can figure out exactly what you need to do and how to do it. So let's dive in. Team level agility. When we're talking about teams, there's different structures and processes at the team level. You could be running Scrum, you could be running Kanban, you could be running Scrumban, but that's okay because it is imperative to the work that those teams are doing. And we want to ask ourselves when we're at this level, how is work flowing? What is their capacity? Are the teams empowered to make the decisions that they need to? Are they looking at cross-team collaboration? And do they have Jira with the proper plugins in order to do the work that they need to do?
So you may want to ask yourself, why start with the delivery teams? Why not start at the top at the enterprise level? Well, I'm going to ask you, do you want to get your ass fired? I've tried this. It doesn't work. So you need to build a solid foundation for your organization. You need teams to be empowered, interacting with one another. You need quick wins. You need to show leadership, measurable improvements. And you need to do this as quickly as possible, or they're not going to give you the agency that you're going to need to make these bigger changes. So essentially, if you don't do these things, that executive is not going to give you the agency. They're going to essentially say that they're agile, and then in the future, they're going to get their asses fired, or they're going to go out of business.
So I think this really comes down to how do you standardize on a way of working? How do you prepare to scale? Because we all know you can't scale chaos. It's just not possible. You really need to assess the teams on where they are and where they need to go, and identify what are your short-term wins versus your long-term wins. If we do the right things, then they'll begin to have a shared understanding around our backlogs, around who does what and how do we actually do that, and what does success look like for me and my team. I think it can always be abstract, but when we start to identify this and lock it in, we're starting to see better throughput. We're starting to understand our velocity. And then the good thing is everyone has a common way of working.
So next, we're going to look at Jira maturity using standardized templates, simplified workflows. We're going to have fewer custom fields. And you're going to ask, do teams call work the same things? Okay, you're going to use standard text taxonomy? Do teams have standard workflow patterns? Consolidate your Jira workflow schemes. Do teams follow an understood team-level process like Scrum or Kanban or something else? Go ahead and use Jira process templates. With these foundations in place, we can start to work towards team of teams. But it is consistently, we're going to ask ourselves, are we consistently adopting this within the organization? So Jira Align, it will become critical for that visibility at the next level. And when we get into this higher level of visibility, Jira Align is going to graphically represent your processes and provide information flowing and provide visibility to your executives. And there may actually be some visibility, some insights that we can get immediately as we're still settling on some of those foundational leveraging plugins in Jira. We could be leveraging advanced roadmaps, but we just don't want you to stop. Keep progressing on your journey and be flexible and to actually adapt, allow yourself to expand into your higher levels and into other capabilities.
So to quickly summarize, and I know we spent a lot on the team level, but the team level really is the foundation of everything. The goal is to really save time and money, and by doing this, we start to look at how do we consolidate our Jira instances. Some organizations have many, 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 and then when we look to scale to Jira Align, it's like, wait a second, I have too many custom workflows. I need to consolidate. I need to think about how this is all going to come together. And so this is the point in time where we have that conversation around the consolidation, around the standardizing of the tool, of course the ways of working, but then we start to see a greater return on our investment. And then we start really having the conversation around how do we scale up to the team of teams level.
Okay, so let's talk about team of teams. Programs, agile release trains, whatever you might want to call it. Most organizations, they think that they've made progress on the team level, but what you really need to do at this point is integrate Jira and Jira Align. And C Prime, they often see organizations, they struggle here. And so as you may want to skip that first step, your Jira instance may look like the Wild West, and a lot of these custom fields, lots of plugins. And when you do this, you're going to ask yourself, well, what are you going to see at that next level? Unfortunately, not much if you skip that first step.
So again, depending on the context and the framework that you have, team of teams is really when we start to scale up. It's really when we're planning together and negotiating those dependencies. It's really understanding that higher level visibility of the work and then building out a long-term roadmap. We want to understand how we're going to prioritize the work for the teams so that they're making the right decisions on what they need to do. It really is making sure that everything is visible and we're understanding our progress towards work so that we can pivot if we need to, if we do have a disruption. The lower the mean time to pivot, you also need to minimize delays. We know that delays, bottlenecks are such a problem. And so how do we minimize that? Dependency mitigation or dependency management is really one of those things that helps us do that. But you can't do it without collaboration. You need to have people talking together. A tool does one thing, but you need the people talking together about that negotiation, about who comes first, who comes second, what's the highest priority. And Jira Align really helps you do that. So you can't think about it as just connecting links or objects within a tool, but it is a negotiation and an agreement amongst teams. The idea here is that it's not a silver bullet. You need a scaling framework. You can choose any scaling framework you like. It could be SAFe, it could be less, it could be Scrum at scale, it could be something that's totally customized for your organization, but you need that in order to move forward. And you need everyone to understand what that is, and it needs to be repeatable so that the people that are in those roles have the proper clarity, they're held accountable, and then they're also understanding what does progress look like for us. This is where we also start to look at having a common backlog, a shared backlog. Because at the team of teams level, there is a lot of orphaned work that is not connected to our epics, work that is not connected to our strategy or our roadmap. And I would say this is when we start to connect Jira to Jira Align. And that's when we start to see all of the things that all of our teams and people are doing that aren't really driving the value towards our higher level goals. I love the moment when that is connected and that light bulb goes off. It is like, oh my goodness, like now I can see everything. Why are my people doing this work when that's not even the goal that we're going after? We need to be focused on this thing over here. And so having that visibility really helps people have the right conversations and make the right decisions.
So when I was a customer, when we did the initial integration with Jira to Jira Align, the leadership they were kind of horrified actually. We discovered that though the teams were working super, super hard, I'm sure you can identify with that, what we found out was a majority of the work that they were doing wasn't even a priority. And what they were actually doing was wasting precious time, money on unsanctioned work. And just by stopping them from doing that work and refocusing on the priorities, we actually saved $6 million in the first year. And so and also we doubled the delivery rate. So we stopped working on non-priorities that freed us up to have the capacity to actually finish the priorities. And so the question is, what success will you find here? Well, visibility, transparency on the levels that you haven't seen before. You can have accountability at the right level and the right roles. Jira integration with Jira Align, so we're gonna be lowering duplication of effort. We're gonna increase data quality. And we're gonna connect strategy to execution for really the first time. We're gonna have dependency management. We're gonna have collaboration, planning on cadence. And in short, we're finally gonna have a way to directly connect strategy, and I think that's a really big one.
So now we've done all of the work to get here, and we're at the portfolio level. This is where our executives start to have the confidence in the things that we're doing. They're starting to see the work that is being defined by our programs and our teams. There's no filters. It's all out there. Everything's on the table. So everyone now has to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that's the hard part. So your teams and your programs are now accountable for the work that they're delivering, showing that to your executives. The executives are then like, wait a minute, is that really the thing you should be working on? So again, connecting strategy to execution is important, and it's really all about advancing those strategic goals. And this is something that we do a lot. We really focus on our portfolio level executives here.
Oh, so when we unlock this level, the members of the portfolio, they can now manage and view their portfolios. So relative to execution, which is progress relative to their commitments, resources, which is load versus capacity, and their finances, so their spend relative to their budget. And the ideal state here is, it's really very hard to get to this. And as we all know, just even communicating information down from one level of an executive down to a manager is almost impossible. And in reality, it's hard to get that message across. But with Jira Align, it enables you to have this single source of truth. And one place that everyone wants to go back in reference, that is, if you want to go back in and reference the data, you can do that because everything is auditable. There's a full history of everything. And you can have that confidence of knowing that we're delivering relative to goals, but also that you're delivering on a cadence and you're not overloading your teams and you're not overspending.
So I think one thing you touched on was aligning on cadence. We need to make sure that the organization is on the same cadence. Teams could be operating in sprints, but are you on a quarterly cadence? Are you on like a tri cadence? Whatever it is, but you need that commitment at this level to say everyone is moving in that same direction. And really what we're looking at is how do we also enable the people at this level? The executives may have not gone to a Safe for Teams training, right? But they need to have the right information and context so that there is a common communication. Like, I know exactly what it is you're doing on my teams, and I know what you're doing on my programs. And that's where I think learning and training also comes into play. And I'm not gonna reiterate this enough, but having that common scaled framework really helps here as well. And driving towards project to product mindset really makes a difference. Jira Align has great functionality. So if you implement, or when you implement your scaling framework, I love this because it creates a visual representation. So you could lift and shift, I'm gonna use Scaled Agile, but you can lift and shift that whole big picture into Jira Align. And then you can actually add tips and tricks in there on if I am a product manager or I'm a C-level person, I can click on this and I can understand how to use the tool while I'm actually in the tool. You don't have to go outside of the tool to actually make that happen. Of course, key objectives, key results, all of those things come into play when we're talking about the portfolio level. Every dollar counts. So it really comes to the point when we're looking at what is our hypothesis maybe for investing in something, and then what outcome are we going to get, and then when are we actually going to realize that? And I think this is very important because that's the kind of information that the portfolio level is really looking for. And while the work is being done, the teams actually have the visibility to see how they're contributing to those items. It's not disconnected, it's not siloed. And it's really everyone moving in the same path, in the same direction. So everyone knows what results you're going to expect. And then you can double down and you can make a decision like, is that really working for us, or do we need to pivot? Do we need to go in a different direction?
So once you've reached the portfolio, you're starting to deal with stakeholders and executives. And although Jira Align provides portfolio reports and budgetary allocations, spend distribution, executives, they tend to think of everything like a 1974 Burger King, and they just want it their way. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. We can't predict 100% of what they might want and what they might find valuable. So as your organization, it evolves, you can start to use enterprise insights. And from that, you can start to create these unique visualizations that they're gonna provide them with the information that they're actually asking for. And they, as I said earlier, they can consume where they want it and when they want it. And I say where they want it, they can consume it on their reporting platform of choice, like a Tableau or a Power BI. They can embed it in Confluence, or they can actually re-embed these reports back into Jira Align. And when we've reached this level in the enterprise, you may need to consider other things like HR systems, financial systems, in order to create more comprehensive views. And you can connect that data to Jira Align. And then all that data will flow into enterprise insights, and now it can flow into Atlassian Analytics as well. And where you can then, like I said, then you can create those enhanced visualizations, either Power BI, Tableau, or in Atlassian Analytics. And these reports, these dashboards, they're all gonna aid portfolio teams making decisions, and it's gonna help you leverage actual live data. And so now we've actually reached the top of the mountain. So welcome to the enterprise. And I want you to stop, and I want you to think for a moment. So if you were climbing Mount Everest, we might not take everyone to the summit, right? So think about this. Because if we try to take you all to the summit, some of you might die along the way, and we can't have that. So instead, what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to safely get you to a base camp. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. Instead, as I said, we're gonna try to get you a base camp, but if you were one of those people who wants to go to that summit, or you need to go to that summit, then we're gonna go ahead and tackle that next.
Right, so I think this is the hardest one to achieve. This is not easy. It's not easy to get here. Because when we're talking about this, it really is a conversation around, does the whole entire enterprise need to transform? And when I say that, we still might have pockets of the enterprise that are working in waterfall, and that's okay. But they do need to be folded in some manner. But we're not necessarily going to say to them like, hey, you need to have a product owner and you need to have a scrum master, right? Because that's probably the kind of work that they're doing. They just somehow need to fold into this. And you will ask yourself, well, how high in the organization do I need to go? Maybe I don't need to go all the way up to the C-suite. Maybe I just need to stay at my teams or programs or portfolio. What does that conversation really look like? And then how are you going to enable that? And of course, it all comes back to that mean time to pivot. So I think what we're really talking about here is an agile culture, right? Like, we want to embrace a culture of transparency, a culture where we're able to have conversations openly. We're not concerned so much about what red, yellow, green means. Red can't be a bad thing, right? Like, we need to embrace all of that, and we need to do it across the entire enterprise. And you're really thinking about, what do I need to do that's absolutely necessary? And is the value that I'm going to invest worth the spend? Will I get the outcomes based on the changes that I'm trying to make? The goal isn't the sake, or the goal isn't change for the sake of change. The goal is really about, what do I need to do for my entire enterprise, and what's the best thing for us to sustain or to pivot going forward?
So you're now ready to align multiple portfolios within the organization around strategic outcomes and goals. That's our next step. And you can now see your mission, vision, values. You're gonna link that to your strategy. You're gonna link that strategy to your execution. And the executives, they can see live progress. They can see spend. They can see progress towards the goals and across the roadmap. And using, I gotta be honest, using Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides, it's just not a modern way to manage an enterprise, okay? But we do it every day. And using tools that are gonna require you to double enter data, or using other tools, they're not helping either. So they're certainly not going to help you survive, in this disruptive environment, but they may actually cause you to be disrupted.
So again, we're really thinking about Jira Align, and we're thinking about, how does that integrate with all of the different systems? Derek talked about our financial systems, our HR systems, and Jira Align is really your value delivery system. So it's all of the things working together and leveraging enterprise insights or Tableau or whatever you do to create the reports. So that's where we're looking at the value here. And it's also thinking about not just your product and technology teams, but your HR teams, your marketing teams, your operational value streams. All of that comes into play here, and that's really where we start to get the whole picture around our people, process, and tools, and how do we make the right decisions around those things.
So how are we actually going to do this?
Oh my goodness. So I think as we're wrapping up here, that's always the hardest question. How do we actually get started? And one of the keys to success that I've seen is you need some kind of LACE, COE, PMO at the enterprise level, and then maybe you have sub-pockets of that at every individual level. But it's one coordinated team that's working together on your standards, your framework standards, your governance, making sure people are enabled with the right things, they know where they sit. And I can't say it enough, but if you don't have those things in place, you're just going to struggle. And I think laying that foundation is really important. You want everyone saying the same thing. You want a common taxonomy. I'm calling this orange an orange. I'm not calling this orange a peach, right? Like that doesn't work. So we need to make sure we enable everyone in that way. We don't want different portfolios having different processes. It's just not going to work. I think this is also where we start to look at how do we standardize on assessing our organization? Are we actually going back and getting feedback from everybody? Is this working? Is this not working? Do we need to make some improvements? Are we also talking about metrics? Are we looking at how we're measuring everything? Because if we're not, then how do we actually know we're doing well or we're not doing well? And so I think this is where it all comes together, and those are some things I've seen.
So you are going to need executive support as they're going to actually decide to invest in this transformation, and they're really going to actually move the needle. We get it, that you still need to keep the lights on and invest in areas, that are going to get you the greatest return. But chances are teams are going to resist change, and they're going to need change is going to need to be made. And for that reason, we're going to need executives to explain to them why this change is important, and maybe introduce people like C Prime, so to those people to help them listen. And you're going to need help, and you're going to need trusted advisors who are going to have proven tactics and proven techniques. And you're going to need a coalition of the willing. You're going to identify lighthouse teams, programs, portfolios who can show others the way. You're going to create safety for them. You're going to help them be successful. You're going to understand modern practices, giving the organization context. And once they are stable and operating as hoped, you're going to expand to more teams, more programs, more portfolios.
Right, and I think this is really where you need partners and you need a team. So C Prime and Atlassian work really well together. We do this all the time. And it really isn't about just one particular thing, like infrastructure, technology, or governance, but it's really thinking about the whole entire solution where people, process, and tools are the things that all need to come together. And does it work? It does work, but there's no silver bullet. You can't do this without making an investment. You can't do this without having a commitment. You need to get everyone involved and engaged. Everyone needs to be happy about the work that they're doing and how they're contributing to this. So again, like I said earlier, it's not just about implementing a tool. Jira Align is fantastic, but it's not going to save the day. You need everything else to come along with it.
So what does success look like? I wish you could take it, what I'm going to say, if you could record it or take a picture of it. But I want you to consider something. Of the Fortune 500 companies that existed 50 years ago, I'm literally after I was born, right? Only 60 of them are left. 500 down to 60, okay? And of those Fortune 500 companies that exist today, 40% of them are going to be gone in the next 10 years. So an organization, it may need to transform in order to avoid being a part of that 40%, or if they want to be the next Fortune 500 company. And most certainly, you're going to need to transform in other areas and other levels of the organization if you don't understand why you're working on what you're working on. And you want to make sure that that work that you're doing, it's aligning to your organizational goals. Because your ability to survive that next event, it's going to depend on your people. It's going to be important on the system of delivery. And you're going to need this in order to unleash the potential of all those teams.
And I think that brings us to the end.
And if we have a few minutes, go ahead, yes. Any questions?
Hi, thank you guys. Everything you said is truth, okay? We are surviving. One little question. A few times during conference, I've heard the Jira Align is great with finances. Not sure if that's entirely true, because on the epic level, you cannot really break down finances on monthly or even on quarterly basis. So do you know, is there a way around to make sure that it can be tracked on that level?
Excellent question. So yes, at the top level and at an epic level, if you're thinking epic level, I'm saying a portfolio level. You're gonna identify a budget, you can have forecasted spend, estimated spend, and an actual spend. I guess the question is, what's good financials? Because we recognize we're not a financial system of record. We identify saying, well, these finances are directionally correct, and if you really want you want that number to be exact, well, then we can actually integrate with your financial system of record, overwrite the endpoints in Jira Align so these numbers actually do match up. But beyond that, again, I guess, how much level of detail do you need? What we're trying to do is give you an insight early enough that you're going to have a cost overrun, or that the budget plan that you have forecasted, when you start to see the deviation of the plan, I'm going to quote within the product, it's called the investment versus spend report, where you have a financial plan with an investment mix, and you're investing in the next capitalizable awesome thing, but as I said earlier, you're still investing in keeping the lights on or investing in your platform. But unfortunately, what happens is when you start to forecast, estimate, and actually do the work, all those investment mixes start to deviate. And so directionally, they're correct, and they give you the insight to stop teams from working on those wrong things. Or it gives you the insight that maybe we need to invest more in certain areas. So I guess to address the question, it's getting better. I can definitely say that our financial calculations or capabilities are getting better. But again, I would definitely say that we're focusing more on value and less on cost.
Something that I was hoping that you were gonna reach here. You got close, but not quite there. And something that I've seen time and time again when you're trying to do an agile transformation, the executive team thinks in waterfall. They want like phase gates. They want to know when a product is going to be done so that then a new product or new project or something can start. And those are the terms that they think in. But in Agile, we iterate on features. And when an executive wants to know like how long something's going to take, an Agile team doesn't know. Right. It's a completely arbitrary number that they throw out there. So now you've got a major gap between the expectations of the executive team and the distrust they have for your development teams, right, because they're not meeting their deadlines. Right. So I just want to know how you approach that and how you, or if you've been able to overcome that, that obstacle.
Yeah, I think one of the things we leverage is roadmap planning, right? And you can do planning for your roadmaps on a quarterly basis, but then you can also look at horizon planning. So you can look much further out. And if the executives are saying, I'm expecting this particular thing in Q4, because we have to deliver it then that needs to be communicated down to the teams so that at least they have the visibility down the pipeline to say, okay, what do we need to do? We're in Q1. Are there some things that we can iteratively plan and do that will enable that thing as we get down to Q4? What does that look like? So you're never really gonna get rid of the whole like waterfall or like I need to deliver something by this particular time. It's just the nature of the things that we do. But how can you communicate that in a way and build it in a way so that you can see things sooner? So you're demoing sooner. Is that the thing I actually need? Do I need to make changes? And then you can also communicate it to your customers like, hey, it is probably gonna be that thing, but we actually discovered a bunch of new things that we're going to deliver with that at the same time.
Yep. And if I could add, the mechanism I use with executives is we call it value engineering. And those executives, they're in the mindset of phase gates, and they believe that they know what they want and when they want it, but actually they don't know until they see it. And actually what we want to do is make sure that we're making the right investments. We want them to make the right investments. By using value engineering to clarify what that is within Jira Align, we're actually asking when we're gonna deliver a product to a customer, we're going to invest in something, we're going to look at the cost relative to the value delivery. And we want to challenge that executive to say, is this a good investment? And periodically, as a former customer, going back to the executive saying, I recognize we have limited time, limited budget. Is this even a good investment to continue to invest in? Or should we reallocate funds to something better? Or if we find something that's better, double down on that so we can get a better return or a disproportionate return. So there's some of that is not just educating the executives, but showing them different ways of thinking something. I think we might be out of time.
Yeah.
One more
One
question.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah, I think just some other things. So on the, and of this, I think we're one of the 60 actually, Rock Automation. I don't know if we survived that list, but we're excited. And on the investment versus spend, we have used that and found that within some of the PIs of some of our portfolios, like epics were deleted, some features, it's some weird things where we're like, oh, there's probably 6% productivity there on your labor pool. So it might not be accurate, but to Derek's point, I think it's directional on like, hey, is that what we really planned on investing in versus the exact penny, you know, to where we can make corrections. I think on the other question too, and I'm excited to answer these two because I think we have a lot of these same examples. When your art room or program room, I think it is, when you're doing your PI for what percent you're loading, right? Like to load to 80%, you probably all tell your teams that. Load to 80%, right? For having that surge capacity. I try to compare that to like running. You know, if you've ever ran a marathon or anybody run a race, you're not gonna be sprinting through the whole thing, right? You're gonna have a consistent pace. And I think based on your question is, you know, if a team is consistent in their velocity, you can predict within 8 feet and 3 miles from now exactly where I'm gonna land, right? So that predictability to what you estimate, to what you plan on your horizon is what I think is most important. My question, I just wanted to comment on those, is my question is around the economy that is either growing or contracting faces the C-suite challenge, you know, of, you know, what is above or below the line for investments when we commit to the board or whatever, right. You know, relative to cost constraints or resource constraints. So I know there's some scenario planning in Align, but have you guys looked at how to leverage the backlog to account for, you know, like what needs to come off the list to still meet our revenue targets and understand for trade-off scenarios that happen in a, you know, any economy?
Right. You want me to take this?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I'm starting to think of value engineering. You know, when we understand, if we know, again, what our spend is or what our budget is on that, we need to quantify upfront before we start it, well, along the way, what's the value we're gonna get out of that? And when we have to make those trade-offs, I mean, Atlassian was no different. You know, in times like this, we need to look at what is going to give us and our customers the biggest outcomes and what are the things we need to trim. And so we did this same exercise. And it's about looking at what our spend is relative to the value that we can create. And just be rigorous about measure, but have that hypothesis that if we invest in this, it's gonna give us a disproportionate positive outcome. And if not, we have to be rigorous and stop it if it's not gonna give us the outcome we expect. And that's the only way we're gonna get to the other side. And so I wish there was more to it than that, but it really is have that hypothesis, test the hypothesis, and pivot based on the outcomes.